Let's start in the shallower waters and work our way toward the monsters in the deep ocean, because we have some crazy ones. Sunlight Zone. Tongue-eating louse. This might be the most horrifying parasite in the ocean. It enters a fish through its gills and latches onto the base of the fish's tongue. It then severs the blood vessels in the tongue, causing the tongue to die and fall off. The louse then attaches its own body to the remaining stump, effectively becoming the fish's new living tongue. The fish actually uses the parasite to grab food, while the louse feeds on the fish's blood and mucus. It is the only known parasite to entirely replace a host's organ. Parasitic Barnacle. The parasitic barnacle starts life as a microscopic, free-swimming larva that hunts down crabs. When it finds one, it finds a weak spot in the crab's armor and injects a tiny blob of its own cells into the crab's bloodstream. The blob then grows into a network of root-like tendrils that spread through the crab's entire body, wrapping around its organs and its brain. It completely takes over the crab's mind and body, and then it chemically castrates the crab, stopping it from molting or reproducing. If the host crab is male, the barnacle alters its hormones, transforming its body shape and mind to act like a female. The barnacle then pushes an egg sac out of the crab's abdomen, and the zombie crab spends the rest of its life lovingly cleaning, grooming, and protecting the parasite's eggs, believing them to be its own. Sarcastic Fringehead. This creature is also known as the Demogorgon fish, and you'll soon understand why. Found in the shallow waters off the coast of California, this fish usually hides in discarded shells or even man-made trash like glass bottles. Most of the time, it looks like a fairly normal, funny-looking fish. However, there's a trick. It's violently territorial. When another creature gets too close to its home, the fringehead's jaw unhinges and expands to terrifying proportions, making its mouth look like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. If two fringeheads fight over territory, they press their massive open mouths together in a horrific match to see whose mouth is larger, wrestling until the smaller one retreats. The blue dragon. At first glance, the blue dragon looks incredibly beautiful. However, it has an incredibly dangerous characteristic. It actively hunts the Portuguese man-o'-war, one of the most venomous marine animals. Not only is it immune to the man-o'-war's deadly sting, but the blue dragon actually rips off the stinging cells, swallows them, and stores them in its own finger-like appendages. It concentrates the stolen venom, meaning a sting from this tiny creature can be far more painful and dangerous than man-o'-war itself. Bobbit Worm. The bobbit worm looks like an insect straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. It can grow up to 10 feet long, though most of its body remains buried in the ocean floor. The insane part is how it hunts. It's basically completely blind, and it waits with only its 5 antennae exposed. When a fish brushes past, the worm bursts from the sand with lightning speed, snapping its scissor-like jaws shut with enough force to cleanly slice a fish in half. It then drags its prey down into its underground burrow to be eaten. Twilight Zone. The Goblin Shark. While its appearance is already disturbing enough, its hunting method is the real nightmare. Its jaws are attached to elastic ligaments rather than being firmly fixed to its skull. When the shark's snout senses the faint electrical fields of a passing fish in the dark, the goblin shark's entire jaw detaches and slingshots forward out of its face to snap up the prey, just like the monster's inner jaw from the movie Alien. The Pram Bug. These disgusting creatures, widely rumored to be the visual inspiration for the xenomorph queen in the movie Alien, swim in the open waters until it needs to raise its young. Then, it seeks out a salp, which is a barrel-shaped, gelatinous animal. The pram bug uses its sharp claws to slice into the salp, systematically carving out and eating the salp's internal organs while it is still alive. Once the salp is completely hollowed out, the pram bug climbs inside the empty, fleshy barrel, lays its eggs, and drives the corpse around like a living submarine. Stoplight Loosejaw. In the Twilight Zone, many fish use glowing light to attract prey or communicate. Most of this light is blue or green, because those colors travel farthest in water. The Stoplight Loosejaw, however, produces a bright red beam of light from beneath its eyes. Because almost no other deep-sea creatures can see the color red, the Loosejaw effectively has an invisible sniper laser. It can shine this red spotlight directly on its prey without them ever knowing they are being watched. When it strikes, its bottomless, fleshless lower jaw shoots outward from its face to impale the victim on needle-like teeth. Sloane's Viperfish. This creature holds the Guinness World Record for having the largest teeth relative to head size of any fish in the ocean. Its fangs are so enormous that they literally do not fit inside its mouth. If the viperfish were to close its jaw normally, its lower teeth would pierce straight through its own brain. Instead, the teeth slide up on the outside of its face. To hunt, it hinges its neck back and unhinges its lower jaw, swimming at high speeds to impale prey like a living spear trap. Lerneaeopodid Copepods. If you are a fish at these depths, your life is already hard. Then comes this parasite. It is a specialized crustacean that swims through the pitch black, zeroes in on a fish, and burrows directly into its eyeball. It locks itself in place using anchoring appendages that root into the tissue, and it proceeds to eat the fish's eye from the inside out, completely blinding it. Then, the parasite's long, fleshy, maggot-like body hangs out of the ruined, blinded eyeball, dangling its twin egg sacs into the water. It stays attached for the rest of the fish's life, constantly draining fluids directly from the animal's head. Midnight Zone. The Deep Sea Anglerfish. You might recognize the anglerfish for the iconic glowing lure dangling in front of its face, but its physical appearance isn't the most disturbing thing about it. Its mating process is. Finding a mate in the massive, dark void of the deep ocean is incredibly difficult. When a newborn male anglerfish, which lacks a lure and digestive system, finally finds a massive female, he bites into her flesh. He then releases an enzyme that dissolves the skin of his mouth and her body, fusing their blood vessels together. Over time, the male's eyes, fins, and internal organs completely dissolve. He essentially ceases to exist as an individual animal, becoming a permanent, parasitic appendage on the female's body, which acts as a living, on-demand sperm bank. Deep Sea Siphonophores. At first glance, a deep-sea siphonophore just looks like a very long, glowing piece of string drifting in the water. However, it is not actually a single animal. It is a terrifyingly massive colony of clones, which can reach over 150 feet long, longer than a blue whale. It's composed of thousands of individual organisms called zooids. These zooids all share the same DNA, but they mutate to serve different functions. Some become swimming bells to propel the colony, some become stomachs to digest food, and some become long, venomous, stinging tentacles. They all link together physically and share a single nerve cord, essentially acting as one giant collective superorganism. They coil themselves into massive spiral formations in the midnight zone, essentially casting a giant glowing net of death that paralyzes and pulls up anything that swims into it. Zombie worms. When a massive animal like a whale dies, its carcass sinks into the midnight zone or deeper, creating what scientists call a whale fall. This sudden feast attracts horrific little scavengers known as the zombie worms. Zombie worms have no mouths, no stomachs, and no teeth. Instead, they secrete a potent acid that dissolves the solid bones of dead whales. Once the acid creates a hole, the worm extends root-like tendrils deep into the bone marrow. Bacteria inside the worm's roots then digest the fats and proteins extracted from the marrow, feeding the worm. The female zombie worms are the ones dissolving the bones, while the males are microscopic and never develop past the larval stage. Instead, dozens to hundreds microscopic males live permanently inside the gelatinous tube of a single female, existing solely as a living sperm bank to fertilize her eggs. The black swallower. In an environment where you might not see another meal for months, you cannot afford to pass up prey just because it's too big. The black swallower took this logic to an absolute extreme. This fish rarely grows longer than 10 inches, but it routinely hunts and swallows fish that are twice its length and up to 10 times its mass. It grabs its prey by the tail, unhinges its jaw, and effectively walks its mouth over the struggling victim, swallowing it whole. Its stomach then expands like a transparent balloon to hold it. Sometimes, however, the black swallower is too ambitious. If it swallows a fish that is too massive, the prey begins to decompose in the swallower's stomach before it can be fully digested. The resulting buildup of decomposition gases inflates the swallower like a balloon, floating it violently all the way to the ocean surface, which usually kills it. The colossal squid. While the giant squid is famous, the colossal squid is heavier, thicker, and objectively more dangerous. Living deep in the waters around Antarctica, they grow up to 43 feet. To hunt in complete darkness, the colossal squid has the largest eyes in the entire animal kingdom, roughly the size of dinner plates. It uses these massive lenses to spot the faint, glowing bioluminescence of the deep ocean's ultimate apex predator, the sperm whale. The truly disturbing part of the colossal squid is its weaponry. While giant squids only have suction cups lined with small teeth on their tentacles, the colossal squid is armed with swiveling, razor-sharp hooks. When a sperm whale dives down to eat it, the squid fights back violently. We know this because sperm whales that return to the surface from the midnight zone are covered in massive, deep circular scars from the squid's ripping hooks. Pelican Eel. This creature looks less like a fish and more like a set of jaws attached to a long, whip-like tail. Its lower jaw is massive and loosely hinged, equipped with a pouch that functions much like a pelican's bill. When it hunts, the eel swims toward a target and inflates its mouth like a giant parachute, scooping up massive amounts of water and engulfing prey that is significantly larger than its own body. To attract its meals in the dark, it uses a glowing pink and red organ at the very tip of its tail as a lure. The abyss. Pelagic abyssal ribbon worms. These worms look like flat, gelatinous strips of purple or clear, unskinned meat floating in the water. They have no eyes and no visible face. The nightmare comes when they detect prey. Their entire forehead splits open, and they violently explode a massive, muscular tube outward from inside their head. This inside-out throat wraps around the prey, stabs it with a sharp stylet, and injects a toxic cocktail of neurotoxins. The toxin liquefies the prey's internal organs while it is still alive. The worm then uses the tube like a straw to drink the melted internal soup, leaving behind a hollow, floating skin husk. Giant sea spiders. If you have a fear of spiders, the abyssal plain is not safe at all. Sea spiders exist in shallower waters, but in the depths of the abyss, they experience a phenomenon called deep sea gigantism, growing to the size of dinner plates with leg spans up to 20 inches across. Because they are essentially nothing but legs, they don't actually have a body large enough to hold their internal organs. To solve this, they keep their digestive tracts and reproductive organs inside their legs. They stalk slowly across the seafloor until they find an animal. Because they don't have jaws to bite, they thrust a large tube-like proboscis directly into the animal's flesh and simply suck its internal juices out like a straw. Xenophyophores. Imagine a single-celled amoeba, but scale it up to the size of a dinner plate. Xenophyophores look like convoluted piles of rotting human intestines or spongy brains scattered across the seafloor. How they grow is incredibly disturbing. They secrete a slimy cement to glue their own accumulated poop and sediment together to construct a jagged, armored shell. Furthermore, they act like biological sponges for toxicity. Their bodies naturally concentrate massive amounts of heavy metals and radioactive elements like uranium, lead, and mercury from the seawater, making them literal radioactive clumps of poop. Carnivorous abyssal sponges. Sponges are supposed to be harmless filters, but in the abyss, there is not enough organic matter in the water to filter, so sponges evolved into meat-eaters. How it actually eats is the most disturbing part. Their bodies are covered in millions of microscopic, Velcro-like hooks made of glass. When a tiny crustacean drifts into the sponge, it gets snagged on the hooks. Once the prey is trapped, the sponge doesn't chew. Instead, the sponge's individual cells physically migrate through its own body to surround the trapped animal. They envelop the prey alive and secrete harsh digestive enzymes to dissolve its body into a liquid soup, which the sponge then absorbs. Trenches. The Magnapinna. Most squids are built for speed and agility, but the Magnapinna squid is a slow, drifting phantom. In 2021, a submersible filming the bottom of the Philippine Trench spotted a young Magnapinna cruising at 20,381 feet, making it the deepest dwelling squid ever recorded and the only squid species known to cross into the trenches zone. They have one of the eeriest bodies ever. They can grow to total lengths of 20 to 26 feet long, but their mantle is relatively small. Nearly 90% of their length is made up of freakish spider-leg tentacles. It hovers completely motionlessly, just inches above the trench floor, acting like a giant living drift net, waiting for creatures to blindly collide with its suckers. Hirondellea gigas. These are the flesh-eating swarms of the deep ocean trenches, living at the absolute bottom of the world, including the 35,000 feet mark of the Challenger Deep. They are pale, blind, oversized crustaceans that exist in the millions. Because the trenches are a dead end for falling organic matter, these things are hyper-aggressive scavengers. When a carcass drops into the trench, thousands of them descend on it in a writhing, pulsing mountain of limbs, stripping it to the bone in hours. Also, if a carcass doesn't fall for a long time, they turn on each other, swarming and eating their own kind alive. Order Platyctenida. Most comb jellies are beautiful, delicate spheres that drift through the open ocean. However, the extreme pressures of the trenches force these creatures to abandon swimming altogether. They look like flat, fleshy, slimy mats or deflated balloons anchored permanently to the walls of the trenches. Because they can't chase down food in the crushing dark, they do something insane. They deploy two incredibly long, hair-thin tentacles that drift out into the void like a pair of biological tripwires. These lines are covered in microscopic, exploding sticky cells. When a passing trench shrimp blindly bumps into the thread, it gets instantly glued down. The stationary jelly then slowly reels the struggling victim up into its slit-like mouth, digesting it while it is still anchored to the wall. Hadal spoonworms. These creatures have fat, unsegmented, dark green bodies that look like raw sausages, and they remain deeply buried beneath the ground to survive the extreme environment. The crazy part is how they get food. The worm shoots a single, flat, ribbon-like tongue out of them. This tongue can stretch up to 10 times the length of the worm's actual body, crawling and slithering blindly across the mud like a snake. The tongue is coated in sticky mucus that licks up decaying organic waste and rotten debris. Then, the reproductive cycle adds an extra layer of horror. If a floating microscopic microscopic worm larva lands on the open mud, it grows into a normal one. However, if a larva happens to land on the female's tongue, the contact chemically mutates it into a microscopic, eyeless, parasitic male. She sweeps him into her mouth, and he spends the rest of his life imprisoned inside her reproductive tract as a literal microscopic sperm factory. The Mariana Snailfish. This was, for a long time, the deepest living fish ever discovered, surviving down to about 27,000 feet. Its skin is so thin and clear that you can see its liver, stomach, and muscles through its body. But the real body horror happens if you try to bring it to the surface. This fish is literally held together by the crushing weight of the ocean. Without that immense pressure pinning its structure together, its body completely loses integrity. Within minutes of reaching the surface, the fish literally dissolves and melts into a gelatinous, unidentifiable puddle of liquid goo. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord.